Hello students, and welcome to lecture 4 of mechanics of materials. In this lecture we are going to discuss torsion in shafts, a very important topic, but in order to understand it we must have a clear concept of shear stress that we discussed in the previous lectures, where we said that the force will be parallel to the area resisting the shear, and it gives a certain deflection, like for example delta x, and then you have also an angle of theta or deflected angle. In order to calculate the shear strain, we could either use the change in length delta x divided by the height or length of the body, which is L, or you can either use the tangent of theta to get the shear strain, which we already discussed in the previous lecture. If you don't understand the concept, just go back and watch it. Now, once we have that idea, we can go on to discuss the torsion in shaft, which is actually twisting of structural member due to torque. Meaning to say, if you have a multiple torques applied on a shaft, it is very possible that the shaft will have a twist. Okay, it can happen in multiple mechanical components, specifically when your shafts are rotating at high speed or have a high torques. It can be quite dangerous at times. So you have to select the right material for a shaft based on where what its working will be. Okay, so it's very important to understand the twist of the shaft. Now when we have torques applied, for example in this case opposite torques are applied, you get a twist. Okay, and we know that the torque are actually given by, for example, if you have this forces, okay, you have forces applied here, okay, and they are separated by a distance d, then obviously your torque is be given by force multiplied by the distance between the forces. Okay, or now this is just basic idea of what a torque is. Okay, that will give you a twist. Now we assume that the body is split into multiple discs and they are rotating because of that torque. Okay, now the rotation of these discs would mean that they are sliding over each other. Okay, and when we have the sliding involved, we already know from the previous lecture that is actually creating a shear stress, as the forces are parallel to those the cross section areas of the discs. Okay, now let's assume one end of the shaft is fixed, but the other end is rotating, moving from point B to B prime. Okay, this gives you an angle right here, theta, which is known as the angle of twist. Now it's also important to note that once you have these multiple discs, okay, and they are giving you an angle of twist each one, we can see that the angle of twist would be varying from one disc to another. It will not be constant, as you can see that from point A to point B the angle of twist in each disc is changing, and the maximum angle of twist is at the far end at point B, which is shown here. Okay, so each disc will have a different angle of twist for a given torque. It is calculated using this formula, where we have the theta as angle of twist, T is the torque as we already discussed, L is the length of the shaft. So if you see from point A to point B, that is the total length of the shaft. So as you move from point A to point B, your twist angle is increasing. So the angle also depend on the length of the shaft. G as a shear modulus, which is the material property very important for the shear stress strain relationship, which we already discussed. And then you have the J as polar moment of inertia. It is given by pi by 2 or power 4 for a solid shaft, but we will discuss that in the upcoming slide, what it is and how it works. Okay, now for now, if you see that you have the distance from B to B prime as the change or maximum distance, giving you an angle theta, which is the angle of twist, but you also have a angle phi here, as you can see, that is making the between the edges AB and AB prime. Okay, now it is very important that if you try to find out the shear strain, you can do it just by taking the tangent of this angle phi. Okay, you tangent of this angle phi, because your maximum change in length is B to B prime. In previous cases we represented this as delta x. Okay, and then you have the original length, which is from A to B. Okay, so your change in length delta x, and then you have the maximum length, this as L, you can take it as L. Okay, so your strain can also be calculating using the distance from B to B prime, or delta x. Previously we represented it as delta x, and the length A to B, which is the length L in the previous cases. So you can then also change this length B to B prime using this triangle. Okay, so you have a triangle. For example, you have a circle, and then you have this angle theta here. This is point B. I'm taking this cross section right here, and you have B prime. Now this length is actually the deflection delta x that I'm taking. That S is equal to radius times the angle theta. Okay, so if you know the radius of the body, okay, or radius of the shaft, you can actually use that and multiply it with the theta in radians to get the S. S is actually this distance delta x. Okay, so that is the distance from B to B prime. So you can replace this B to B prime by r theta. Okay, once you do that, you get this shear strain formula, okay, where B to B prime is given as r times theta. Okay, very simple, straightforward. So this will give you the shear strain due to twisting. Okay, so if you know the this angle of twist, you can actually calculate the, and you know the radius and length of the body or length of the shaft, you can get the shear strain. Very simple, straightforward. We also need this polar moment of inertia. We do not yet know what that is. Okay, and in order to understand that, we need to understand the area moment of inertia. Now if you look at these two planks and you apply, let's say, certain load on each one of them, the only difference is one is flat, one is set as vertical. Okay, you applied the same load on both of them, which one will deflect more? Okay, so let's say you have applied 100 kg. It's common sense that obviously the flat one will have more deflection than the vertical one, but we do not know why. Okay, so the reason is because the distribution of the cross section area from the bending axis. Okay, so if you look at the bending axis, the vertical one has the more distribution, or it is having more area above and below, or it is further above and below the bending axis, but the one with the flat has the area distributed very close to the bending axis. Okay, now this area distribution is very important in terms of bending. Okay, and it is the moment of the area moment of inertia is defined as the resistance of being cross section to bending. Okay, it quantifies how area is distributed relative to the neutral axis. In this case, you can see the bending axis or neutral axis. In the vertical case, the area is distributed further away from the axis, but in the flat case, it is distributed very close. If you look at these three cases, in this case the area is distributed very close to the axis. In this case, they are a little far, so your area of moment of inertia is comparatively more than this one. And in this case, if you look at the third case, which is the I beam, so area is distributed quite further away. Okay, and the more area, the more further, the better the area moment of inertia. And you must have seen that it is put it in this specific position so that the load is applied from the top and it has more resistance to bending, because if this is the bending axis, okay, and your area is distributed farther from the bending axis, so it will have quite resistance to bending. Okay, all right. Now the area moment of inertia is given by, for example, if you have this cross section given here and you have this small delta A selected, and your bending axis is, let's say, x-axis. So this is your bending axis. Then in this case, what will happen is, if this is the bending axis, the x-axis, the formula for the moment of inertia, if you are taking x-axis as the bending axis, will be integral of the distance of that element y square divided by that elemental area dA. Okay, so you have to integrate this according to the distance from the bending axis. So the more the distance, the more will be your moment of area moment of inertia. Okay, similarly, if you are taking your y-axis as your bending axis, okay, so if let's say this is your bending axis, this y-axis is the bending axis, okay, that means that you will be either applying force in this direction or in this direction, that will be bending about the y-axis. Okay, so in that case your elemental area is this, your distance of that elemental area is taken as x, so it will be given by x square into dA and taking integral of that. This x square means that the farther the area is from the bending axis, the better or more will be its moment of area moment of inertia. Okay, so I is given as area moment of inertia, y is the distance from the bending axis, and dA is the elemental area. Alright, now taking the same concept into the polar moment of inertia J, which is we are using in the angle of twist. So it is the same concept, but it quantifies the section resistance to twisting. Okay, so instead of bending or applying some force on this, okay, we are trying to apply a torque. Okay, we are trying to apply a torque, trying to create a twist in this case. Okay, now whatever the resistance to the twist will be, that will be quantified using the polar moment of inertia J. It considers the area distribution related to the axis of rotation. Now instead of bending, we are taking this axis of rotation about which the body is going to rotate, and how the area is distributed about this axis will actually tells us how much is the resistance to twisting. I hope it is making sense. Now the formula for this is, because we know in, let's say take this cross section is shown right here. If you take this cross section, we have a y, we have an x, and then in this case, because it is shaft, so it will have a certain radius or rho. Now radius, total radius will be obviously different, but if it is, let's say, not circular region, so you will have a radius rho. Okay, and then you have elemental area, let's say dA. Okay, so in this case your polar moment of inertia will be given as rho square dA. So it is defined in terms of radius, not in terms of x and y, because we are talking about the polar. Okay, and this rho square is actually equal to the x square plus y square. Using the Pythagoras theorem, you can simply do it something like this. So this is y, this one, and then you have this x, which is actually the same as this one, so you can take this as x, and this is rho. Okay, so you can use Pythagoras theorem, which is actually giving you the rho square is equal to x square plus y square. Okay, and using that you can actually split this rho square into x square plus y square, and then using the integral principle you can separate the x square and y square, giving you the same formulas that we actually discussed for right here. We discussed for the Ix and Iy. Okay, so these are the same thing that we discussed for Ix and Iy. This will be Ix, this is Iy, or the opposite ones, and then you can calculate the polar moment of inertia if we know the area moment of x, area moment of y. Okay, and then you can sum them up to get the polar moment of inertia of that shaft. Okay, now that we know these quantities, we can actually calculate the polar moment of inertia using this for a solid shaft. For the hollow shaft, the concept is the same. The only difference is that it will have a pi by 2 into the radius out power 4 minus radius inside power 4. So you have a hollow shaft, that means you will have an Ri, and then you will have an Ro. So this is Ro, or outside diameter, and then you have the inside diameter. Okay, so that's the only difference between the hollow and the solid shaft. Okay, now when we talk about the shear stresses in the shaft, because you just take one disc that we shown here, so you take any one of these discs, okay, and obviously it will be sliding with the other disc, so it will be producing some shear stresses or applying some shear forces, because the forces will be parallel to the cross section area. Now for a solid shaft it will be something like this. For a hollow shaft it will be applied in this region only. Okay, so there are no stresses applied because it's a hollow region. Now let's say you have an elemental area dA and you have the shear stress applied. Okay, so shear stress is tau. We know that the uh, shear stress is equal to the shear force, or you can represent it with V, whatever you want to represent it, and then you have the dA. Okay, so your shear force applied on the small area, so your shear force will be equal to the shear stress multiplied by the dA. Okay, so simply it's given, the force is given here, okay, which is tau dA. You have this force applied and it is having a radius of rho. Okay, so it's very simple. As you can see, when you have the force and you have the radius, you can actually create a torque in this way. Okay, and the torque will be given as the force, so force terms are these two multiplied by the radius, so force times the radius is giving you the rotating torque at that specific element of that specific element. Okay, so it is integrated from 0 to r, so 0 from this point to the maximum radius, so this is integrated from minimum to maximum radius. And what is integrated? Your force, this one, times the radius. Okay, so it will give you the total torque applied on the disc. Also you can see that if you rearrange this specific equation, if you rearrange this, so you just multiply it with the rho, and this will become rho square, and you also have to divide with the rho. Okay, so if you multiplied this equation with rho, so the top will become rho square, and you also divide it with the rho. After rearranging, you take this one out and you take the stress out. Okay, so it gives you the stress and rho here, but what you will be left with is rho square and dA, so you will be left with this one. This looks exactly like the polar moment of inertia right here. Okay, so you can actually replace this whole term with the J. Okay, so you will be left with tau divided by rho multiplied by the J, and this equation you can then rearrange to find out the shear stress applied at that certain cross section. Okay, I hope it's clear enough. If you have any confusion, please let me know. It's very simple, straightforward equations that we will be using in our problems. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Take care. Bye.